Hello and welcome to part 2 of Humanity is One. It's October 23rd, 2018. It's just after 8:30 on a Tuesday evening, and just finished with my last set of clients. It's been a long day, as I'm sure it has been for you as well. Wanted to follow up to the video that I did yesterday, in which I mentioned the march the migration that's taking place from with thousands of people of Honduras towards the U.S. border. And in that video yesterday, I happened to mention the idea of globalization and nationalism. And I wanted to just provide a little clarity there in the process so that there's no equivocation. Firstly, as they are making their way towards the U.S. border, in no way, even though I truly believe that the earth is one country and mankind its citizens as the Baha'i writing state, I do want to clarify that I'm not suggesting that the U.S. border, the U.S. should just automatically allow this influx, huge influx, just automatically. There's a system in place that enables people to enter legally into this country. Okay, and I think we should do all we can to support that legal process. But what I do think is wonderful about this migration and march, and as you've seen, it includes children, people of all ages, mothers with their young babies, is that it's getting the attention of the world in a way that maybe it wouldn't have otherwise. It's a reminder that refugees, whether it's towards here in the States or other countries, refugees is a serious matter. The reasons that people are fleeing their country for various reasons of violence and corruption and injustice. So I think we're at a point where increasingly we will see a number of developed nations, just as we saw with Europe and Syria, number of nations that will experience a great influx, or at least the attempt of many people seeking asylum and refugee status for various reasons, to the point that we cannot just sit back passively and just allow certain nations, rogue or otherwise, to just have their way with their citizens. So imagine for a moment if in this country, in the U.S., right, we have two agencies. We have CPS, Child Protective Services, and we have APS, Adult Protective Services. And think for a moment, do you think it's okay if you have a family that feels it's okay to abuse their family members or their children? Are you okay, answer this question for a moment, are you okay with them being able to treat their family and their children however they like? Imagine they say to you, well, leave me the hell alone. It's my family. I'll do whatever I want. Do you think it's okay if we just sit back and let people treat their families and their children however they like? And obviously, hopefully the answer is no, that you're grateful that we actually have agencies, that there's a process in which we are compassionate and protective of those who cannot either protect themselves or determine their course of basic living. So kind of on a global scale, we've got that same opportunity. If we just sit back passively and let certain nations, either oppress or systematically, take out through genocide various approaches that countries have, if we just let them, do that, eventually all of the world will pay the price, because eventually it leads to asylum seekers and refugees for various reasons. And I don't fault them. We would do the same. So I just wanted to clarify there that at some point the world, because it is such a small neighborhood now, there are certain things at some point that must be done. I'm not saying it's the responsibility solely of the United States, but I am offering that the countries of the world come together to consult, to dialogue on what will their approach be if we decide to just allow certain nations to just see how things play out. Let's see if they can create a society, a civilization that is just and fair to their citizens. How long will we sit back and let various oppressions and genocide take place? So it's not just Honduras. We can see how Venezuela, things are going in Venezuela, certainly Syria, a lot of countries. I believe Yemen is another number of them. If I'm mentioning your country and I've left it out, if I've left out your country, I apologize, but there's a lot of them. At what point do the nations of the world just sit back passively? At what point will the United Nations actually be given enough power the authority where it can, rationally, systematically, wisely intercede on behalf of these nations where the people, the citizens, have no say, where there is an unjust political and voting system. So think about that for a moment. I'm certainly glad again that we have CPS that can protect children and adults, those who cannot fend for themselves. So at some point, some countries, if the corruption is too entrenched, going out with picket signs and protesting at some point, it can be, nowadays, it can be especially difficult for the citizens to overthrow a corrupt system, a corrupt government or regime. So sometimes there may be cases, I'm not saying in the, right now any specifics, but there have been and there will be cases where it will require the intervention collectively, an alliance of nations that can collectively, not unilaterally, but collectively can organize an approach that can come in and do what is best for the people of the world in whatever country they reside. So want to make sure I'm clear on that. The idea of nationalism, as I mentioned, it's something that's fair in some ways is growing around the world. That's as long as we feel that we're able to isolate without considering the interests of the world. We will find, we will let the evidence speak for itself, how problematic that will become. I won't make any clear judgments. I know I may have come across that way in my first video, but I want to just clarify. Let's become observers. Science walks on two legs: observation and theory. Everyone has their theories and opinions as to what the best approach is. We've got our theories. There's been enough theories over time. We can actually look back historically for various approaches. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that we go in and just try to create a regime change for its own sake, and to try to plant a pawn for supposed democracy. I'm not suggesting that at all. But that we do, decide as to what is in the best interests of people. With nationalism, again, at some point we can sit back, but at some point it's going to be knocking on our door, just like we've got knocking on our borders. Okay, not just U.S. border, but many borders that are being, crowds, the masses are seeking some sort of protection, and the great nations of the world have the opportunity to provide that. Be nice if we would provide that for our own citizens at the same time. That's maybe one of the issues with many people that support nationalism is, hey, can we actually do what is right here at home? And we've got to do both. That's the responsibility of governments. It's not about just helping the wealthy. It's about collectively doing that which is right for the country. Okay? So I challenge politicians to do that which is right, not being myopic in our thinking, but really being able to consider the direction that humanity is headed and the diversity that makes up humanity, the diversity that makes up, for example, the United States, and what it really represents their best interests, and not this oligarchy where power resides in the hands of the few wealthy people. Okay? And in terms of globalization, again, the world is a neighborhood. Goods, services, we certainly around the world, but the U.S. especially, right? We've got supposedly plenty of resources. We've gotten a great big tax return or tax cuts, and I know people that are have great paying jobs, big multi-billion-dollar companies that have benefited from these tax cuts. And what are they doing with some of that tax cut? They're still outsourcing tremendously. Okay, so so this whole idea of what I mentioned about science walks on two legs, observation and theory. What are the observations about trickle down economics, right? Well, we keep hearing that stuff spewed like it's fact and like things actually trickle down. But it's amazing. We give a country a $1 trillion or $2 tax cut, and because we have capitalism, this extreme capitalism as such a value, that we still will do everything we can to increase profits at the expense of jobs for our own people. So politicians have a great responsibility. My joke, you probably have heard, is poly means many and ticks are blood-sucking creatures. So be careful that politics does not become a group of many blood-sucking creatures, but they actually have our best interests and they're not parasitic, just with their best interests in mind. We need a new system. Eventually, there's actually a new system that is in its grassroots around the world, in which there will be no campaigning. The future of humanity, that I can tell, and there's plenty of evidence and experience it's actually happening in its grassroots, is that the whole process of electioneering and negative campaigning that we see, this childish campaigning, will be a thing of the past eventually, because our current political system tends to attract egos. If you've ever noticed, certain jobs and careers tend to attract certain personality types. And so politics, the current system of politics, certainly here in the US and much around the world, tends to attract a fair bit of ego. And the people that tend to be best for the position actually have no desire, they have no hankering for the position. The people that have no desire for the position tend to be the ones best equipped for it. And the ones that have the hankering, you kind of have to wonder at times. Many of them have good intentions, but it's, if you hang out around in a cesspool long enough, you're going to get some mud on you, which often happens. So eventually we'll wake up to the fact that the current system, we know it's broken, but my estimation, it's beyond repair. We need to welcome a new system that the one that is in its grassroots will prove itself effective, and I consider eventually will be adopted. That is clear and evident to me. If you've get a chance to actually see what that system is, it's a magnificent one, which at some point I can speak to that if you guys would like. Thank you. Just want to make sure that I'm able to clarify. If you have any questions about some of my thoughts, before sending a negative message or criticism, ask me first. Ask me what my views are. Ask me to give some additional clarity, because I try not to think in black and white. In terms of, I personally am an independent, and so I try my best to not to get political or to draw too much to one side or the other. To try to look at the facts and look at what people actually stand for. So I try to avoid these platforms of dichotomous thinking that seems to drive our political process, which of course is so divisive for our country, which you may know our founding fathers warned against having this divisive two-party system. House divided upon itself cannot stand. And what do? We continue to nurture it. Humanity loves black or white, either or thinking. And so thanks for taking the time. Please do what you can to advocate for the oneness of humanity, whatever that looks like for you, knowing that the world is increasingly becoming more diverse, The people of the world are continuing to move and migrate around the world, just as the United States is made up of the people of the world. So just consider that and bring compassion. Continue to bring compassion rather than criticism and fear. See if you can bring compassion and love, recognizing that none of us chose the place of our birth, the color of our skin, the culture. So much that we didn't choose, but we can choose to work towards our oneness, to familiarize ourselves with diversity and people that may be different from us. That's how we grow spiritually. That's how we can consciously, one person, one community at a time, work for the betterment of humanity and not just one country. No man is an island, no country is an island, and the sooner we realize that, the more there will be harmony in the world. Instead of focusing on otherness, we focus on our commonality. We all have DNA, mostly the same. We all come from one same source. And so if we can celebrate that source, that's the most beautiful thing about humanity, is that we all mostly desire the same goals of unity, of peace, of love, acceptance, and then perhaps for those who believe in a higher power, ultimately worshiping the same creator, regardless of what faith that might be behind. Faith might be behind it. We all worship the same source. Enjoy life and do your part if you can. Thanks so much for taking the time.